It's a great honor for me to be here at the Empire Club of Canada today, which is arguably the most famous and historically relevant speakers podium to have ever existed in Canada. It has offered its podium to such international luminaries as Winston Churchill, Ronald Reagan, Audrey Hepburn, the Dalai Lama, Indira Gandhi, and closer to home, from Pierre Trudeau to Justin Trudeau. Literally generations of our great nation's leaders, alongside with those of the world's top international diplomats, heads of state, and business and thought leaders.
It is a real honor and a distinct privilege to be invited to speak to the Empire Club of Canada, which has been welcoming international diplomats, leaders in business and in science and in politics. When they stand at that podium, they speak not only to the entire country, but they can speak to the entire world.
Good afternoon, fellow directors, past presidents, members, and guests. Welcome to the 118th season of the Empire Club of Canada. My name is Kelly Jackson. I'm the president of the board of directors of the Empire Club of Canada and associate vice president at Humber College. And I'm your host for today's virtual event, Canada's video game industry, a national champion making a global impact. I'd like to begin this afternoon with an acknowledgement that I am hosting this event within the traditional and treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the homelands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wyandot peoples. In acknowledging traditional territories, I do so from a place of understanding the privilege my ancestors and I have had in this country since they first arrived here in the 1830s. As farmers in southwestern Ontario, I imagine they felt a deep connection to the land, and yet likely did not recognize how that connection was built on the displacement of others. Delivering a land acknowledgement for me is always an important opportunity to reflect on our human connection and responsibility to care for the land, and to recognize that to do so, we must always respect each other and acknowledge our histories. We encourage everyone tuning in today to learn more about the traditional territory on which you work and live. The Empire Club of Canada is a nonprofit organization. I would now like to take a minute to recognize our sponsors who generously support the club and make these events possible and complimentary for our supporters to attend. Thank you to our lead event sponsors, BLG and Durham College. Thank you also to our supporting sponsors, Global Public Affairs and Nordicity. And thank you to our season sponsors, Bruce Power, Canadian Bankers Association, LiUNA, and Waste Connections of Canada. I want to remind everyone participating today that this is an interactive event, and so those attending live are encouraged to engage with our speakers by taking advantage of the question box by scrolling down below your on-screen video player. We have allotted some time for Q&A towards the end of the discussion. If you require technical assistance, please start a conversation with our team using the chat button on the right-hand side of your screen. We also invite you to share your thoughts on social media using the hashtags you will see displayed on the screen throughout the event. To those watching on demand at a later date, and to those tuning in on the podcast, welcome. It is now my pleasure to call this virtual meeting to order. I am delighted to introduce our panelists. Jayson Hilchie, President and CEO, Entertainment Software Association of Canada, and our moderator today. Deirdre Eyre, Head of Canadian Operations, Other Ocean Group Canada, also known as BEEP. Francis Baillet, Vice President Corporate Affairs, Ubisoft. And Michelle Lean, Director of Sales, Microsoft Canada, Xbox team. Welcome to the Empire Club of Canada's virtual stage. Before we hand it over to our panel, I'd like to invite Cameron McDonald, Partner, National Co-Chair, Sports and Gaming Law at BLG, one of our lead sponsors, to deliver some opening remarks. Over to you, Cameron.
Thanks very much, Kelly, and good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the entire BLG team, I'd like to extend our warm thanks to the Empire Club for providing us with the opportunity to be here today as lead sponsor alongside such great panelists who we'll hear from shortly. It is definitely an exciting time to be in the video game industry in Canada right now, Our country has become a major leader in this emerging industry, quietly growing into one of the largest and most successful of its kind in the world. And as Canada's largest law firm, with a national sports and gaming law focus group that extends from coast to coast, with subject matter experts across all areas of the law, we are well versed in supporting the growth and the development of both established as well as startup and high growth companies in the space. And in that capacity, we find these reports that come out from ESAC Interdicity on a biennial basis very useful, as they help provide the reader with a more holistic and macro appreciation of the growth, opportunities, and challenges arising in the Canadian video game industry year over year. And this report is certainly of great interest this year to many in the industry, as it covers the period most impacted by the global pandemic and illustrates the resiliency of this sector, as well as the challenges it faced, as the way that we were all used to doing business seemed to turn upside down overnight. In this regard, and as you'll see later in the video, the latest report reveals that the majority of video game companies in Canada experienced declines in productivity over the pandemic, with the larger players suffering the bigger brunt of that impact. As well, only 1 out of 10 large companies in Canada intend to return to a fixed office environment in this sector. So the video game industry is certainly no exception to these new demands for hybrid work environments. And we could likely devote an entire segment of the Empire Club just to discuss this topic. It's certainly something in hot debate right now in the legal community. In terms of success stories, notwithstanding the challenges posed by COVID-19, the Canadian video game industry continued its tremendous growth trajectory over the past 2 years, injecting much needed capital into our economy and living up to its reputation as a national champion, making a global impact. To that end, the latest report reveals a significant number of new active video game companies emerging in Canada since 2019, something we have certainly witnessed at the firm over the course of the past couple of years, especially in our Ontario and Quebec offices. Video game companies are also expected to generate upwards of $4.3 billion in revenue this year, reflecting 20% growth since 2019. And I'm fairly certain that my son's addiction to playing Fortnite may have contributed to at least half of that $4 billion revenue figure, but I will digress. And last but certainly never least, the report reveals that a large proportion of established companies in the sector have also adopted equity, diversity, and inclusion programs, which is certainly a positive development and always a much needed one. So there's no shortage of encouraging data from this report, but being mindful of time, I'll wrap up here and would just like to reiterate how delighted we are as a firm to be joining some of our clients and industry friends today at the Empire Club to hear more about this latest report, as well as the insights of our fantastic panelists. So without further ado, I'll now turn it over to Jayson Hilchie, who's moderating today's panel, and he can get the discussion started. Over to you, Jayson.
Thanks very much, Cameron. And I just want to thank the Empire Club of Canada for hosting us today. I want to thank all the sponsors that have made this event possible. And I want to thank the great panelists that we have here today to talk about some of the things that Cameron just mentioned about how the video game industry is making a big impact on Canadian economy and social fabric. So before I do that, I do want to play a video for you to really set the stage. It is a video that really kind of creates the greatest hits of some of the statistics that have come out of our economic impact study that we just released a couple of weeks ago. And it really will show you some of the innovations in games that are being made in Canada. It really is an exciting time to be in the video game industry, and we want to really show you and give you the context before we get into the conversation today. So if you'll watch this 2-minute video, we'll begin the panel immediately afterwards.
And it went like
hope you all enjoyed that. It really is an easily consumable way of understanding the context of how big the video game industry is becoming. I was in this job, I started this job in 2012, and the amount of growth that I've seen over the last 9 years that I've been working and working with our members to grow this industry has been phenomenal. And like Cameron said, the ability of our industry to be resilient through the pandemic really, truly was remarkable. But I'm not the speaker today, and I'm the moderator. And so we've got a great panel of people that really represent the entire industry. We've got Deirdre Beep-Air from Atlantic, Canada, running a Canadian-owned and operated studio. Francis Baillet from Ubisoft. They are the largest employer in our industry in Canada. And then Michelle Liam from Xbox. Xbox is building consoles, but also making games in their own studios in Canada. So we've got a really interesting group of people to talk about the full gamut. So let's get into it. And Francis, I'm going to start with you from Ubisoft. You are the largest employer in our video game industry in Canada. You've got studios across the country, obviously in Montreal and Toronto, but also smaller cities such as Halifax and Winnipeg. And you've recently opened studios both in Saguenay and then last week in Sherbrooke in Quebec. Now, as a global company, why has Ubisoft chosen to invest so heavily in Canada? What makes Canada such a great place to make video games?
So you actually want the recipe, Jason?
If you've got the cookbook, yeah.
So I think there's 4 ingredients really when you look into that. And after that, it's a question of mixing all of those ingredients properly together. But I think the first ingredient is really the right financial conditions to set a studio. Creating a game, I don't need to tell you, Jason, it's a innovative, but yet a very risky proposition. And so if you want to reduce your investment risk, having such programs like you have in multiple provinces here in Canada, the IDM's program, the Interactive Digital Media Program, coupled with the SHRED tax credit or the Scientific Research and Experimental Development Program that you have at the federal level. When you work those 2 things together, it really helps reduce your investment risk. And when you reduce your investment risk, you automatically create more appetite for risk. And when you create appetite for risk, you create innovation. And so this proposition that we have here in Canada on the financial side is really one of the 4 key ingredients. The second one is really the access to talent. And don't get confused. There's always been a scarcity of talent in our industry. We've never seen a situation where there was a surplus of talent in the video game industry. So what's happening now is not new to us. So what we've been able to do everywhere we set a studio is to work in partnership with college and universities and create new programs or, accelerate the existing programs with new people and new students coming into the program to feed that new world or those jobs of the future that we're creating in the industry. The third ingredient, I would say, is something that sometimes in the shadow, I think most of the time is in the shadow, is the extraordinary people that work in the economic development agencies around Canada. And every time you see a press conference like the one you saw last week in Sherbrooke, you always see the conclusion of multiple years of discussion with development economic agencies or foreign investment agencies or people really passionate around creating opportunities in their cities, their province, or their country. So this is really the third, but sometimes more absent element that people don't recognize right from the start. And last but not least, I would say that the opportunity to work on iconic brands is really important. When you have the luxury to work on Splinter Cell and Assassin's Creed and Rainbow Six and Far Cry and Watch Dogs, those are the type of brands that are played worldwide by hundreds of millions of people. So what happened then is that you have commercial successes, money that comes from outside the country, that comes back to the country to be able to pay for more talent and be able to create more games. So it's really a virtuous circle.
Yeah, and some of these games that we're talking about, Francis, we're talking about budgets similar to motion pictures. I mean, $100 million productions just for the production of the game, plus another $100 million for marketing and distribution. I mean, these are massive games. And, you know, I just go back to your comment about talent and not finding a surplus of talent. You know, our economic study showed that Quebec generated about 1,000 new jobs over the last 2 years in our industry. But there are about 2,000 open jobs available right now in our industry in that province alone. So the growth could have been, you know, much more substantive. But you know, we're struggling, I think, to find those people. But you know, it does lead to me in my next question to you, Francis. I'll go back. You know, why has Ubisoft decided to open so many studios across Canada? You know, is it because of the want and need to diversify where you're finding that talent? Because you've opened up studios in some really interesting spots, right? I mean, obviously Sherbrooke wouldn't come to mind as the top spot where you would open up a studio. Obviously, you've been doing this for a reason. Halifax as well on the East Coast. Why not just hire everybody in Montreal and build a mega studio there?
I think there's been a shift, right? So if you look back in 1997 and a few years after that, it used to be, you know, if you want to employ the economic development terms, it used to be that investment attracted talent. So wherever you set shop, people would flew from all over the country to work in this specific location. But now there's been a change. And really, over the last few years, what we see is that actually is the opposite, is investment follow talent. So we are following talent wherever it is. And we are offering that talent to work either in one of our main studios or in a smaller studio, but in their own city. So you can actually be born, be raised, study, and now work, if you want to work in the video game industry, in your own city. And that's a very interesting proposition to the people from those cities.
It sure is. It's definitely an interesting proposition for the economic developers too. In a past life, I was one of them. And I can tell you that every small town across Canada right now is trying to figure out how they can get the video game industry to come now with this work from anywhere kind of approach that seems to be being taken. Thanks, Francis. I'm going to pivot now to Deirdre, to Beep. Now, you're based in Atlantic Canada. It's not an area that's traditionally known for game development, even though we just talked about Ubisoft as a studio. There are some other big brands. But in spite of this, you know, your Other Ocean Group's been able to grow into a real success story, you know, with multiple studios in a couple of different provinces on the East Coast. You know, you're making games that are being played all over the world. Now, outside of creative talent that Francis was just talking about, you know, what are the factors that have supported the game development industry in smaller provinces like PEI and Newfoundland? You know, and how have you been able to grow there? How have you been able to find the talent that you need in that part of the country?
I think, Jayson, it's important first to understand how devastating out-migration and brain drain has been for Atlantic Canada for many, many years. So there has been for such a long time, I mean, I'm 55 years old. So, you know, from when I was a child, I was hearing about diversifying the economy from our resource-based industries. But it's taken a long time for all the players to really understand that, and meaning, you know, the educators, industry, government. But I think now we're really getting that right. And so for the video game industry, I think we ticked a lot of boxes, right? We were appealing to young people to want to work in our industry. We have a very creative, I would say, culture in Atlantic Canada. I mean, specifically, if you look at Newfoundland and Labrador, for example, I mean, every second person on the CBC is from Newfoundland and Labrador. You know, it's disproportionately so. And also, of course, our technical and engineering background from mining and oil and gas, et cetera. So I think, you know, the tools were there. We just needed the people to do it. And we needed that collaboration to do it. And people like my brother who left Atlantic Canada back in the 80s and went to California and started his first video game studio out there. You know, he had a passion to want to give back to the region. And I think that's quite indicative of a lot of people who've left our region. They won't necessarily come back and live because they've started their families and homes other places, but they are prepared to help either financially or through their networks. I mean, look at yourself, Jayson. I mean, Jason's from Nova Scotia, his wife's from Newfoundland and Labrador, and he's the first one to always, reach out to me to get me to the table with these larger companies like Microsoft and Ubisoft and be able to have our voice heard. So I think that's really played a part too. I will go back to the ticking of the boxes, though. I think as well, we've embraced the importance of immigration in Atlantic Canada, and that's allowed us, while we were working with the long-term strategy of getting our educational institutions to bring in the curriculum that we needed for industries such as ours. We had an immediate need, of course, for experienced talent. I think some of the biases toward Atlantic Canada that are often the case in other regions of Canada meant that we weren't having, plus also competition from the larger companies. In the early days, we weren't having success in recruiting from other parts of the country, but great success in recruiting from all over the world. And that, of course, also has ended up giving us a very, in many cases, a very diverse workforce, which helps the bottom line in the end because it makes our products better. I could really go on about this all day, but I'll leave it there.
Well, the pandemic has really kind of changed the situation there, right? I mean, in the Globe and Mail today, they were saying Nova Scotia is about to hit 1 million people. I know when I worked in economic development in Nova Scotia, that would have been a dream that I don't think any of us thought we were going to see because the trend was moving the other direction. And Francis has a studio there, Ubisoft, and Take-Two that makes the PGA Tour games has a studio in Nova Scotia, and obviously you're in PEI in Newfoundland. So what we are seeing is some opportunity on the East Coast, and it'll be interesting to see as this out migration from Ontario to the East Coast, where houses are a little cheaper and people are moving, whether or not that's going to have an impact on our industry there.
Yeah, certainly those things like the cost of living were very helpful in the early days. Prices are rising now, and that's something else we'll need to get our heads around as we move forward. But I did want to pick up on one point that Francis mentioned too, and it's sort of interesting, at least for our company specifically, when he spoke about working on these iconic titles, and that was really a big part of our ability to attract, because Other Ocean, because we had originally started in California, although with Canadian owners, we were a third-party publisher for the most part. That was our bread and butter in the early days. And so we've worked on some really great titles, and that helped us with the attraction of our staff. So for those who would know this, larger publishers like Ubisoft would hire companies like Other Ocean to work with them on the development of their products. So we would be able to have those games in our roster as well. But also there's a group of people too who want to work on their own original titles. So it's great to work on these iconic titles, but then there are also those in the industry who have worked on these titles and have those on their resume, but also have an interest in developing their own original IP. Some would call it the sort of holy grail of video game development, to be able to work on your own IP. And an indie, like a company like ours, we've had the ability to be able to do both because of the great relationships we have with our publishers and the success we've had on projects like Rick and Morty, which we were nominated for an Emmy, and Minecraft and some other titles that we've worked on. So we had those on our roster, and that allowed us to be able to develop our own products too, which is really interesting to a lot of creative talent.
Yeah, that is all additional information that really sets the stage for this question to Michelle. Now, you used the term third-party publisher, and I mean that's maybe a little bit of inside baseball for a lot of the people in the audience today. Now, Michelle, Xbox is the example of a first-party publisher. So we use these terms: first-party publishers, third-party publishers. But first-party publishers, they make the boxes, right? They make the consoles like Xbox and PlayStation, Nintendo. That's what we call first-party publishers. And then third-party publishers would be like Ubisoft and Other Ocean, those who make the games that are then played on those consoles. Kind of like I guess if we were going to compare it to TV, which I hate to do, it's kind of like the channel and then the producer, the film company that makes the show, and then the channel is the distributor. But I don't know whether that's an exact good example. But you're the example of the first party publisher, Michelle. Meaning that you produce consoles, people play, but you also produce amazing games here in Canada, like Gears of War, made in at the Coalition Studio in Vancouver. But you're also well known for other games that are sold worldwide, like Halo. What does the growth of Canada's video game industry mean for Xbox, both from a hardware perspective, but also because you are making games as well? So you're doing both. So what does this amazing growth that we're seeing mean for you?
Yeah, no, thanks, Jayson. First, I would say it's great that you do have first party and third party and big developers and small developers on the panel. I think it's perfect to represent really the industry as a whole. But from a Microsoft perspective, the demand has just been unprecedented, both from a hardware perspective as well as a games perspective, whether it's a game that Microsoft has made or a third-party game. And what I love about this industry is gaming is really one of those things that's introduced a lot of young people into careers in tech. So not only are we as a whole entertaining and building communities, but the platform is there to build interest in tech careers as well. So when you think about Microsoft on the game development front, I kind of think of two things. One, really proud of the first party, bigger, development like the Coalition, who's made Gears of War, these big AAA titles made in Canada, such a great story. Big commercial success. But we also have a program that I'm really proud of called ID at Xbox. And this is a platform that actually supports smaller studios around the world, including in Canada. So studios like MDHR that made Cuphead, Capybara made Super Time Force. There's even a single developer named Andrew Sholdis who made a game like Tunic. And what I love about this is it's important to recognize that in order to create a really broad, inclusive gaming community, there has to be something for every type of gamer. There's so many devices to play on and so many different types of games that it's symbiotic. It allows more development to create more games that is then broader and more inclusive for the different types of gamers out there. But it also, from this ID at Xbox platform, also supports these independent creators. It really gives them a platform to showcase their creativity, their art, and really help them potentially reach broader audiences that they wouldn't otherwise be able to reach.
Yeah, it's a really interesting program. And I mean, it's extremely important, I think, as well, as we move into this next generation of the industry where content is king. Right? Everybody is now competing for content. And so a lot of the first party publishers like Xbox and even some third party publishers like Ubisoft are supporting independent developers, helping them get their games to market, helping them get them out there. And, a lot of people talk about this next generation of the industry being the content wars because it's really not so much anymore about the hardware. It's about what games you can find on that hardware. And so it should be really interesting, but that program is fantastic. And yeah, you've mentioned some really good ones that were actually made here in Canada. So now, Francis, the Canadian video game industry employs over 32,000 people, as we saw in the video, and that's up 17% from 2019, which, keep in mind, we're traversing the last year and a half, 2 years of the pandemic. One of the things that's really changed, obviously, not only have we been resilient, we've been able to create more jobs, but the whole way we work has been upended, right? How's Ubisoft been able to adapt to the pandemic to sustain its growth and continue to release, some of these AAA titles that we mentioned are costing upwards of $100 million? And how have you been able to maintain such strong collaboration with your teams in this work from home, work from anywhere environment and continue to put out things like Far Cry and how are you doing it?
Yeah, it's a good question. When you think about it, we went from 7 studios in Canada to 6,000 studios from one day to the next, right? On March 12th, 2020. And I must say that only after 1 week, we had everybody up and running in those 6,000 different individual homes. It's amazing when you think about it, to so quickly adapt to a unseen before situation, right? And so when you look back and you try to analyze what played in our favor, right, during that unbelievable period, there was 2 things. I think the first one is that most of our employees are also gamers. So for sure, they had a great equipment at home and they had a great internet connection at home. So it was not like they had to all of a sudden equip themselves with internet and fast or high-speed internet connection or with powerful PC. So what we needed to do is to add a layer on top of that, to add the secure remote desktop access, thanks to the Citrix partners that we have. So that created the capacity to work remotely at home in a confidential and secure environment, at least on your PC. But there was another ingredient to that sauce, and that was the capacity we had over the years to work in co-development with multiple studios around the world. So we were not new to working on Teams or creating on Zoom. This is something we did daily, every day we worked, even before the pandemic, to connect with people in Singapore and in Paris and in India and from all over Canada to create together a single game. So yes, we expanded that to 6,000 different studios at individual homes, but the culture was already there to work in collaborative fashion with people all across the world.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, this concept of distributed development. I mean, Ubisoft is obviously, with all of its studios, probably one of the leaders in being able to make games across multiple studios in multiple time zones all around the world. And that technology and expertise certainly helped with that ability to continue to release some of these games. But yeah, it's been really interesting. I mean, we moved home, our industry, almost 30,000 full-time people. And then throughout it, even more, obviously, as we've grown. But yet most of our companies have been able to continue to release the games, mostly on schedule with the quality that we would expect. And, some of them have done phenomenally well. So that is, I think, a testament not only to the companies that work in our industry, but, the business underpinnings that you've all been able to create over the last decade or so that allow you to do this.
Yeah, and I think we need to really raise our hat to we all have very expert IT personnel in our different companies. And, on March 12th, they really raised up to the opportunity to make sure that everything was going to go smoothly for all of our employees. And so I really want to recognize their efforts because, they really allowed that to function and to work out.
Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't look like that's going to change much going forward. I mean, I think Ubisoft has made an announcement that there's going to be some flexibility with the workforce moving forward. You might not be going back to the office full time.
Yeah, we believe in both. We believe that the future of work is going to be hybrid. It's going to be flexible. And thanks to the multitude of studios, you can work from any studio of Ubisoft in Canada. You can work from home. You can work in a collaboration fashion in the studio physically. So it's going to be really flexible and hybrid for sure.
Yeah, it seems to be, as our study showed, a common business strategy moving forward. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Now, Beeb, I'm going to pivot to you, and I'm going to jump to a different question, one that I know you're very passionate about. Our economic study shows that only 23% of the industry is comprised of women, and even fewer than that are actually working in technical roles where they're doing the computer software engineering, programming, or digital artistry that goes into building the games. We know, though, that 50% of players in Canada are women, are females, girls and women. Now, we've talked for years about digital skills and getting those into the school system at a young age. But knowing this is an important issue, and again, one that you're very passionate about, what do we need to do? Obviously, as the video game industry, we're going to take responsibility for that ourselves. But this is a problem that's impacting the broader tech industry as well. But, speaking from ourselves today on a video game basis, what do we need to do to get more women into the industry?
I really wish I knew, but I will try and answer the question. So, and first off, I want to say, I really don't profess to be an expert in this at all. I mean, obviously, I happen to be in this sector, and I happen to do a technical degree in television, but I really feel that this is not a problem that's going to be solved by people like Deirdre Eyre or Michelle. I think this is something, we are sort of the one-ofs in the industry. And I really feel that this is something that needs to be worked on by everybody. So with any problem with regard to inclusion with marginalized groups, or it's really a societal issue. And I don't think that, I can fix it, or my company can fix it, or the companies can fix it, or the educators can fix it. I think as a society, we really need to work together. I don't think it can be fixed by just putting code in classrooms in high school and encouraging more women to do engineering or something. This is something that we really need everyone to come together collaboratively, and it needs to start very young, very, very, very young, from when we put the girls in pink and the boys in blue, or we hand the boy the remote because maybe he can change the batteries more quickly or whatever, it needs to change at birth. And I think it needs to be a collaborative approach. Like I said, I don't think we can lean on people like me or companies like mine. We all need to come together to do it. But really, Jayson, to sit here and try and give you all the answers to something like that, I just don't have it. This is a serious issue. The data is there, though, like you say, right? I mean, we know that that girls and women want to play video games and do play video games, and so one would imagine they would want to work in the industry. And I think that shows in itself that we can think we're doing enough. We can bring certain programs in, but we're simply not doing enough, and we're not looking at this in the broad way that it needs to be. And this really should be everyone's problem. If you look at, there's been so much data done on how having a diverse workforce creates better products, and so this is not just a sort of social issue. This is an economic issue that all of the video game companies and all the tech companies should be working toward with all the different stakeholders. And anyway, there you have it.
No, it's fair. I mean, that's a fair answer. I mean, obviously our industry has been doing what we can with respect to advocating for curriculum changes in the early grades. Our mutual friend, Kate Arthur, who runs Kids Co Jeunesse, who's a third party. I don't want to use the term third party because we've already explained that in video game terms, but she's an outside organization that goes into schools and teaches coding to young kids. And, she's told us very clearly that you really do need to get into the school system before grade 4 to begin introducing these types of skills, to socialize them and make them acceptable, and avoid those stereotypes, like you said, of tech being a boys thing. So, there's things we definitely, need to do there.
I mean, I will say, as a company, we have, we're not particularly successful at it. We have gotten better. We do have lots of women in leadership roles, but as you mentioned, those positions are not necessarily in the production process of the games, although we have gotten better with that too. But, I personally, I always try and make sure that I have women at the table, that I'm raising up our juniors and mid-level women. It's, making sure that they have a say, speaking to the directors in our company who on the production level all are men, regularly making sure that they're engaging the women within the company. And also, like I was saying earlier, you're always great at bringing me to the table. I try to do the same. If I get asked to speak at something and I believe that there's a woman in my company who could easily do it or do it better, I try and make sure that other people get those opportunities too. I say yes to pretty much everything that I get asked to speak at, to show that we're here, that there's women here. So, those are some of the things that I do and our company does. But really, if we're really going to fix this problem, and we've all talked about the talent issues in the country. We've got an awful lot of women in this country who are not engaged in tech or video games when it comes to it as a career. So there's some answers to our problems there if we could figure it out.
Yeah, and I mean that's fantastic. And I mean, Michelle, just to pivot to you, and this will be our last question before we go to the floor and get some questions for our panelists. We just talked about diversity, obviously a very important topic that all of us are speaking about. As Beep is saying, I mean, we really need to ensure that our industry is as diverse as possible. For it's the right thing, but also because we need to access as much talent as we possibly can find. And we need to be as thorough with that as possible. And some of the things, though, that Xbox is doing, now we're moving away to a different type of diversity. And I want to talk a little bit about accessibility with you. Can you talk to me about what Microsoft and Xbox is doing to reach a broader, more diverse audience, both with your games and with your hardware?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and first, I just want to, thank Deirdre for bringing up, the issue of women in gaming and bringing more talent, right at an early age. It's certainly something that we look at Microsoft as well. So I appreciate that, as an industry, everyone's really working towards that goal. And certainly, as you mentioned, Jayson, inclusivity is, we think of it quite broadly. Our mantra is really for gamers to be able to play on the devices they want, with the friends they want, anytime they want. And so when we have that mission statement, we think incredibly broad, and we even think about, the disabilities of different gamers out there and their ability or inability to even hold a controller. Not everybody can hold a controller. So Microsoft has come up with 3 years ago, launched an adaptive controller. And this is just an incredible device. It's been designed for gamers who have limited mobility. It has a number of different customizations. For example, you could have a button with a wheelchair headrest for controls. You could have controls triggered with a knee or foot pressure. It really can be customized depending on the person that's playing and what their abilities, may be, and how to set it up so that they can game. And I can tell you from personal experience, talking to some of those people that have been able to start playing games again with that adaptive controller, it's just opened up their world again, because as you know, gaming really, really connects gamers together through this online community. And it's beautiful what technology has done and, has allowed people to play across the globe. So as big as Canada is as an industry, we're also impacting the global industry, right? We're impacting gamers across the globe with the games that we develop. And so this adaptive controller has just been so powerful to show an example of thinking beyond sort of what we picture as that, traditional gamer, to think about, who can actually play and making it available for people to play. So we're very proud of it. And, even though it's not been a massive commercial success, it's, perhaps not something that's readily, in demand for a lot of people. It's still the right thing to do to make sure that we're reaching everyone who wants to game, not just those that can hold a controller.
Yeah, and just to finish up, it's really interesting too, because it's not just about the controller. It's about the way that Microsoft and Xbox are developing their games, right? I mean, I've spoken with a number of people, and we profiled one of them last year. And these people are part of a group called Able Gamers. They advocate for games to be made with controls that allow them to be able to use them properly. And Microsoft actually also builds games with in collaboration with some of these groups that ensure that the actual controls and the movements and the way that the coding is done in a way that makes this easier for them.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, you think about all of our products across Microsoft, just different ways to really enable all types of different peoples with different abilities to be able to utilize the products and really help everyone communicate together. It's extremely inspiring. And I think that I love that the video game industry with its creativity has really thought that through. And I know we're not the only ones thinking that. But it's great to be able to connect with those communities and really get some deep insights through our engineers, through our developers, of what else needs to be thought about when developing these games to make them completely accessible and completely inclusive.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I suspect that the future only has more to offer when it comes to ensuring the, accessibility within video games. I know it's a massive topic in our industry. Okay, well, I want to thank you, Michelle. I want to thank Francis and Deirdre Beep. That concludes our panel. Now, I'm going to go to the Q&A, and I've got a number of questions here, so we'll do our best. And I've got someone on in my ear letting me know when we have to shut this down. But I'm just going to put these out to the panel, and whoever wants to kind of chime in, we can do it that way. So Monica asks, I keep hearing about growth of jobs being offered in the gaming industry, but what about people that want to transition from their existing job? What experience comes from a different industry that might be valuable for the video game industry?
Maybe I can pick up this one. Hello, Monica. Thanks for the question. I think there's two things to answer your question. The first one is that the video game industry will not hire only artists and programmers. So we need finance people, we need HR, we need marketing, we need community managers, we need technical expertise. So there's a range of different jobs. And as Jayson alluded earlier, there's 2,000 jobs open just in Quebec right now. So I would certainly encourage you to stroll through that. And just at Ubisoft, we have, I believe, 345 jobs opening right now. So there's interesting opportunities. But the other thing I want to mention is that we have worked with different partners, and I'm thinking out of Quebec City, an organization called Quebec 42, was actually helping people to retrain in the programming side of things. So you could be coming from all sort of background with no past experience in programming, and you join Quebec 42, you are offered a 3-year training in programming, alternating with internship. So this allows you to learn a new skill and to get immediately hands-on experience with companies member of Quebec 42. So it's based on the similar school in France, and I know they're opening other 42 schools across the world. So interesting for retraining.
Yeah, and I think it's important that you note, and I may have oversimplified it in my questions, but I'm trying to keep things as outside baseball as possible. And artists and programmers are obviously the biggest portion of the industry. But I mean, Ubisoft, you've got economists, you've got historians to make some of your games as historically accurate as possible. I know a lot of our companies are hiring data analytics people, to ensure that games are as fun as they possibly be, maximizing the experience. Artificial intelligence programmers, community managers, as all these games go online, they form, like Fortnite and others, they form their own communities. And we need people to manage those. And, it's just every year there's new and new jobs that I have to hear. So, for Monica, just know that you don't have to be an artist or a programmer to get into the video game industry. And I mean, production jobs, producer jobs, they're project manager jobs. So if you have project management skills, they would likely transfer over to the video game area. I want to jump to the next one. Rod asks, and this is a good one because it's been in the media a lot lately, especially with the change of name at Facebook. I don't know who's going to answer this one, but okay. So this is really new stuff. At a 50,000 foot level, could you explain how the video game industry will be a pillar of the future metaverse? And we've heard so much about this recently. How should Canada prepare for the metaverse?
We're already there. So I will keep it short because I'm sure Michelle and Deirdre would add on that. But, to be clear, I think that creating the metaverse is creating an opportunity for people to improve their digital life, like to have the possibility to wander around in the UK in the years 1100. And that's already happening through Valhalla, to Assassin's Creed Valhalla. And it's also an opportunity to improve the way we offer our gamers, our customers, the capacity to improve the way they do things in their current life. So whether you're, a repair mechanic and you are able to access the engine of your car on a virtual settings, and you may have expert outside of your garage that give you indication how to fix the engine. That's also part of the metaverse. So I think both by improving the virtual life and by improving the actual life, thanks to the virtual world, you already have in Canada the expertise to do both, actually.
Michelle, Beep, any thoughts on the metaverse?
Well, I mean, I agree with Francis. I think we're already there. I think the technology is already, being built, being executed, being utilized. And I think the exciting thing about it is it's just going to continue to grow from there. So we're already on the trajectory. And I think the sky's the limit. But it's very exciting to think about. And I love the question. Thank you.
Yeah, I figured we'd get something about the metaverse. I'm still waiting for the NFT question that we haven't gotten any on non-fungible tokens, which I wouldn't know how to answer even if we did. So here's a question for, Beep, I'm going to kick this to you. What's the greatest opportunity for Canada's video game industry? It seems to be doing very well, but how do we take it to the next level given the size of the global market, which, by the way, is massive. There's about 2.5 billion video game players on Earth, and the capitalization of the video game industry is approaching $200 billion. So it's absolutely insane the amount of growth that has happened. But how do we get more of that in Canada?
I think I'll take the opportunity here to throw a bouquet to the Canada Media Fund, because it really is a fund that is. Countries all over the world are jealous of this fund, right? So the Canada Media Fund / Telefilm, you might be more familiar with from the film and television side, is a fund that allows for the development of Canadian content. And there is an interactive component to that, so separate from film and television. And it gives an opportunity for startups and small independent companies or family-owned companies like ours, like Other Ocean, to develop their own intellectual property without necessarily having to go for VC funding of some sort or taking all the risk on themselves, which may be quite difficult. So I really think that is a competitive advantage that certainly the smaller companies in the country have when competing against other small indies in other countries, because it is an opportunity for these companies to develop their own original IP so that they're not always working on somebody else's property. It also, if that intellectual property continues to be owned in Canada, and I say that because sometimes these things are bought, but if it's continued to be owned in Canada, it also means that the full revenues from those games can go back to Canada. So, I mean, there's probably lots of different ways to answer that question, Jayson, but I did want to throw that out there because that fund has been so tremendous to so many different companies and allowed so much growth for the smaller companies, which in turn is helpful to the larger companies who end up sometimes buying these smaller companies or providing talent for these companies. And so, yeah, I think that's one area that a continued investment by the government and the other funders of the Canada Media Fund is paramount.
Okay, and I agreed. I'm sure that Francis has his own ideas, and Michelle. I've got one question before I want to wrap it up, and I want to get it in. So I'm going to put this out. I mean, we've been talking a lot about talent. We have a question from a computer game development graduate from George Brown, who's finding it hard to land a job in the industry. Companies want 3D art modelers with experience. Now, this is a thing it's not unique to the video game industry. I remember going through this when I started working in banking. You know, everybody wants experience, but you can't get experience until you get a job. So what advice can you offer on especially on new graduates and juniors getting into the industry and landing that first job?
I'm happy to start that if you want.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know where this person is applying, but I would say that you might have better luck with a smaller indie because, you know, they are more than likely in a situation where they can take on a junior and would appreciate the sort of, I guess, the skills of an artist who has who can be flexible in what they're producing. And you know, a lot of these smaller companies, they really are not able to offer the salaries that really experienced people would demand and expect and deserve. So if you're just coming out of school, you might be in a better position to be trying some of these smaller companies. And some of these smaller companies may not be where you're located. You know, you might have to consider going to a region that has less availability to experienced talent. One thing for sure, make sure you have a good portfolio. When you don't have a lot of experience, it's really important to have something to show the people who are interviewing you. And, you know, whether that's just something that you know, made in your basement or what have you, that it doesn't have to be a whole lot, but some kind of a portfolio for us to be able to review is really important. And I think you'll find that even if you don't land the job, you'll get a lot of good feedback too.
Okay. Thanks. Now, Francis, I'm going to jump to you because obviously you've got a lot of programs like this at Ubisoft to aim to create highways between academia and the studios. So what are you doing? What's your advice?
I think the most important thing is to be visible. You know, if you have a great portfolio, show it around, as Deirdre was saying. You know, make sure that professionals in this industry see your portfolio. Participate to contests. You know, there's the Level Up contest in Ontario. There's the university, the Ubisoft University contest in Quebec. Make sure you join those contests. Make sure you show your portfolio and what you can do. You know, go to Game Jam, make yourself known, make yourself available for those events. Go there, be at the Mega Mabs in Montreal. You know, be at those events that are created for the industry, by the industry, and make yourself visible. You know, at the end of the day, you know, it's all going to be who you are and what you can do. So don't forget to show up who you are.
Michelle, any last thought before we end? I'm being told we're at the end. I'm getting the.
Yeah, I would just say from a LinkedIn perspective, you know, just again, make sure that you're connecting, looking for those studios that you're interested in working for and connecting with them. Again, just elevating your portfolio, your profile on social media, particularly from a professional standpoint, that will really get you ahead of the game as well.
Awesome.
And I wish you the best of luck for those out there looking.
Yeah. Yes. Well, listen, I just want to thank you all. And I think this concludes our Q&A.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jayson, Deirdre, Francis, and Michelle. I'd now like to introduce Tara Koski, Dean of Students at Durham College, our other lead event sponsor, to deliver today's appreciation remarks. Tara, welcome.
Thank you, Kelly, and good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Durham College and all those turning in, I would like to thank our panelists, Deirdre Eyre, Francis Bailly, Michelle Liam, and our moderator, Jayson Hilchie, for the engaging discussion about the growing influence and impact of esports in the gaming sector. As we just heard, the gaming industry is multifaceted, complex, and driven by innovation and growth, which the Canadian Video Game Industry Report confirms with its compelling stats. With more employers and employees now in the sector who are enjoying higher salaries along with huge gains in its GDP contributions, as well as the rise of more Canadian-owned video game companies, it's an ideal time to pursue related careers. When Durham College made the decision to invest in esports, we did so knowing that there was a strong potential for incredible opportunities as an institution for our students and within the broader community. The investment has taken the form of our 3,000 square foot esports gaming arena, our Durham Lords esports varsity team, whose Rocket League squad captured the New England Collegiate Conference Championship in their inaugural season, and academic programs focused on the gaming industry. Now, with several years under operation, and despite the global pandemic, we continue to lead the way in this dynamic space. In September 2022, the college will welcome its first cohort of students studying in our new eSport Management Graduate Certificate program. With its focus on online marketing, copyright law, licensing, sponsorship, event management, content creation, and more, students will be able to learn the tactical skills needed to support and generate revenue within the esports ecosystem, which includes the gaming culture. And just like other industries, achieving success within the gaming sector requires a strong set of both technical and soft skills, which is why colleges, with their focus on transformative experiential learning, are perfectly equipped to arm the next generation of esports professionals with the skills that they need to succeed. So thank you once again to our panelists, as well as the Entertainment Software Association of Canada, for your commitment to driving the industry forward through advocacy, research, and passion. DC is pleased to assist gaming companies and organizations getting to the next level, and by preparing its graduates to significantly contribute and drive innovations in the esports industry. So thank you. Kelly, back to you.
Thanks, Tara. And thanks again to our panelists and everyone joining us today for tuning in at a later date. Our next event is this Thursday, November 25th at noon Eastern Time. Join me for an in-depth discussion with the Honorable Steve Clark, Ontario's Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. We'll be talking about the challenges of housing supply and affordability and how the provincial government is responding. More details and complimentary registration are available at empireclubofcanada.com. This meeting is now adjourned. I wish you a great afternoon, stay safe, and take care.